Welcome back to Fantasy Football. Today, we're starting to look ahead to 2022. We're not going to leave you alone in Week 18. We're going to have plenty of coverage for you, but we also want to give you a little bit of look ahead to what we're going to be doing this offseason, which is going to be working on our rankings for the upcoming campaign. We're going to start with the quarterbacks here. So every day, we're going to preview a different position. So we have the quarterbacks for 2022. So here are the rank lists, the early top 10. This is as early and as raw as you will see them. The top 10 list for myself, for Heath, and for Chris. So here's Heath's top 10 list. I'm going to talk about some of these guys. So he's got Josh Allen, number 1. Mahomes 2. You see the list all the way through 10. Usually we do top 12, but just for the show purposes, we're going to do 10 guys here. So nothing really outrageous. There will be potentially some changes. You never know where Aaron Rodgers is going to play, for example, or if Russell Wilson changes teams, and that changes things for Heath. But here's his list of the top 10 guys. Here's Chris's list of the top 10 quarterbacks. You see some slight differences. Chris going with Lamar Jackson at number 3, Kyler Murray number 5. Again, a lot of the same names you see here, so we're not really differing too much in terms of how we approach these top 10 guys. And then you see the list for me as well. Very similar to a lot of what the same previous list looked like, but we'll have a few different talking points here, and let's get to that right now. So coming into the 2021 season, Patrick Mahomes was the slam dunk number 1 fantasy quarterback among the consensus rankings and was drafted as such. Understandably so, he's been awesome. And as you see here, we're really downgrading him by putting him at 2. But Josh Allen has been the best fantasy quarterback the last 2 seasons. He's going to finish as the number 1 guy. And so, Heath, is it just easy to say right now Josh Allen is the best fantasy quarterback for the upcoming season?
I still struggled with it quite a bit. I wouldn't say it was easy, but the difference for me is, and we've talked about maybe Mecole Hardman coming to be the number 3 guy, and we kind of saw Pringle the last couple of weeks, but he's got Gabriel Davis, who is that number 3 guy. He's got Dawson Knox, who's emerged as a good tight end. He's got depth amongst his weapons. We've seen it with Mahomes. Like, he does not have a lot behind Tyreek Hill and Travis Kelce. And so I think that plus what Allen does rushing is enough to put him at number 1.
Chris, we're seeing, Mahomes, and we may be seeing it as it's unfolding. Travis Kelce, there's been some circumstances, injuries and the COVID situation the last couple of weeks, but his production hasn't been as great, and Tyreek Hill's production hasn't been as great. Is that a big factor for you as why Josh Allen ahead of Patrick Mahomes as well?
Yeah, I mean, part of it is just that pretty much every quarterback starting in week 8 started playing significantly worse. We saw the league-wide yards per attempt drop by almost a yard from the first 7 weeks of the season since. And that's been true of Patrick Mahomes. He's been, for fantasy, he's been decent, but really hit or miss in his overall numbers. I think he's still below 6.5 yards per attempt since week 8. Josh Allen didn't have that swing. He didn't have what Dak Prescott and Patrick Mahomes and a handful of other guys had. He's been consistently great pretty much all season, and that's going back to the start of 2020. He's the only quarterback who's averaged 28 points per game in 6-point per passing touchdowns leagues both seasons.
All right, Chris, so you have Lamar Jackson 3. Heath, you have Justin Herbert at 3. I have Herbert at 3 as well. So, Chris, make the case for Lamar Jackson. We all have him as a top 5 guy, so no big, huge disagreement here. But make the case why Lamar Jackson, who has played well but just hasn't been the same guy, should still be the 3rd quarterback behind Josh Allen and Patrick Mahomes.
Yeah, he was on pace for over 1,000 yards before his injuries and the COVID situations came up. He was on pace for a career high in passing yards by nearly 500 before the ankle injury. The issue was touchdowns. He has a career low rushing rate touchdown and passing rate touchdown, and we know that's the kind of thing that, one, Lamar Jackson has been really, really good at in the past. He's had seasons where he's been, the league leader in touchdown rate. And we know that that's the kind of thing that from year to year, there's very little predictability. It fluctuates greatly for all quarterbacks for the most part, except for Aaron Rodgers and Russell Wilson, really. And so when I look at, if touchdowns are unpredictable and they fluctuate a lot, based on the raw production that you get, I think Lamar Jackson is really, it's him, Josh Allen, and Patrick Mahomes are kind of in a tier of their own, and then the touchdowns will kind of figure out who slots in where. So that's my argument for Lamar Jackson.
Yeah, I think you look at what Herbert's done this year, and he's right around 26, 27 fantasy points per game. In the last 2 years, Lamar's been 25 last year, 24 this year. And that injury is really just kind of bugging me a little bit because that's what we've seen from most quarterbacks that run as much as he does. That eventually the injuries are going to start piling up. So I think Herbert's just a little bit safer. Lamar does have more upside than Herbert. If everything goes right for Lamar Jackson, I think he's the number 1 quarterback again next year. But I think there's more scenarios where Herbert is a top 3 quarterback than Jackson.
He is 2 touchdowns away, Justin Herbert, from tying Dan Marino for most touchdown passes in the first 2 years of their careers. Anytime you put somebody in Dan Marino's category, that should make your eyes open. And certainly both these guys have been fantastic in the early parts of their careers. Hopefully that'll be the case for many, many years to come. Another talking point here for us is clearly what's going to happen with Aaron Rodgers and how does that relate to somebody, let's say, like a Kyler Murray. So it's hard not to say that Rodgers, is he going to fall off, Chris? You seem to have a little bit of concern about that. So let's put everything in perspective here. He does return to the Packers. Devontae Adams is back. Everything stays the same. Can Aaron Rodgers maybe be the number one quarterback again, and we're just overlooking him even by putting him in the case for me at 5 and for Heath at 6?
Yeah, I mean, I've got him at 9, so I'm the low guy. But like the difference between Justin Herbert at 4 and Aaron Rodgers at 9 is practically non-existent. I think it's one big pot of awesome players. It's not a knock on Aaron Rodgers, but yeah, it's mostly for me. It's just a little bit of uncertainty. His age, the fact that we got a quote from him recently where he hasn't ruled out retirement. So I just look at the uncertainty of where he's going to play and who he's going to be playing with, although I imagine he's not going to go somewhere that doesn't have great weapons. I think he's going to pull a Tom Brady if he does leave and land somewhere awesome. But I just think when you add in the uncertainty, how awesome I think Justin Herbert and Tom Brady and Dak Prescott and Jalen Hurts all are, and really Joe Burrow at number 10 for me is right there with them as well. I just think there's just the uncertainty about Aaron Rodgers just drops him a little bit, but yeah, he could absolutely be the number one fantasy quarterback. He's been underrated for 3 years in a row now?
Yeah, that's the problem. He's going to be the MVP of the NFL once again, and who knows? Maybe something else will piss him off going in the offseason. He'll be happy to be the number one guy again. He could still be the number one guy on a different team if he leaves the Packers also, but that ranking will probably change the most depending on where Aaron Rodgers plays, if he plays at all. Joe Burrow, just give me 30 seconds on why are we not having him in the top 5? And I know it's recency bias, but he's nearly 1,000 yards the last 2 weeks, and you see what the upside is with his receiving.
I was arguing against Joe Burrow on Twitter this morning, because I'm glad to see I'm the high guy on Joe Burrow for next year. I don't have to argue against him anymore at all. It's because it's the recency bias. It's 2 games. Even with throwing for 900 yards and 8 touchdowns in 2 games, he's averaging 23.8 fantasy points per game. Lamar Jackson, in the worst season of his last 3 years, was averaging 24.3 before he got hurt. So,
but isn't he ascending, Joe Burrow?
That's not the way these things usually work. Usually they make a big leap, and then like Josh Allen, he's still number 1 this year, but he's scoring 3 fantasy points worse per game than he did last year. We saw that with Lamar Jackson. We saw it with Patrick Mahomes. So I don't think he's going to keep going in that direction. I don't think Lamar's going to keep going in the other direction.
It's just so hard to say. Jamar Chase, this. T. Higgins, that. Tyler Boyd's still there. C.J. Uzomah might do this. Joe Mixon might do that, but we're not going to rank him as a top 5 guy. Believe me, I'm guilty of it myself. But it's just hard not to fall in love with what Joe Burrow can be. And this is why you wait on quarterbacks, because let somebody else run and get Josh Allen and Patrick Mahomes, and 2 or 3 rounds later you might get Joe Burrow, and who knows, the production might be the same.